Prologue. Let's do it. Many people would rather die than think, and that is what they do. Bertrand Russell. All of us think about things. That does not yet make us philosophers, but it nearly does. If you puzzle about why, or whether, there are some things you ought or ought not to do, some things that are good, some things bad, then you are something of a philosopher. If you wonder how things really are, whether the mind is nothing but the brain, whether the world is divinely caused, you are philosophizing. And if you ask questions such as, what does it all mean? Well, there is yet more evidence of your living within the philosopher's realm. Reflecting on the puzzles, paradoxes and perplexities in this book, from ethics to God to space and time, from politics to consciousness to logic, love and fiction, is to do philosophy. Well, it is to do philosophy, one's trying to think systematically and clearly about quite what the problems are, the assumptions made and where they lead. The philosophy here is presented by way of a kaleidoscope of styles, varying from dialogues to monologues, from everyday experiences to bizarre thought experiments, from a discussion with God to arguments between grasshopper and ant, and from the light-hearted to the deeply serious. All, I hope, are polished with a lightness of touch. The chapters are deliberately short, though designed to give rise to plenty of thought, further questions and debates, be they debates with yourself or with others, whether at work, at play, at romance, or even when failing asleep. The word, philosophy, deriving from the Greek, love of wisdom, suggests something grander and more insightful about life and the universe than that of other subjects. True, the purveyance of wisdom can seem far removed from the practices of today's philosophers. Philosophers are usually lecturers, maintaining employment by forever publishing research, even trying to show economic impact. It was different in earlier times. Spinoza ground lenses, Leibniz was a librarian, John Stuart Mill worked for the East India Company, moonlighting as a journalist, and later became a member of parliament. Today there is a tendency for philosophy to be technical. Take a look at some current volumes of academic philosophy. Technical studies have their place, but we should not be misled into thinking that, at heart, philosophy is open only to philosophical technocrats and professionals. Major philosophical thinking, from Plato to Hume to Wittgenstein, is open to us all. I hope that this collection shows that to be so. All things conspire. These puzzles, tales and dialogues embrace the whole range of philosophical wonder, from formal paradoxes in logical reasoning to moral dilemmas. Although they are grouped into themes, to quote Hippocrates, all things conspire, so, the sections overlap as do some puzzles, being different approaches to fundamental perplexities, such as the nature of the self and how we represent the world around us. A few puzzles might have more obviously appeared elsewhere. Newcomb's Paradox, Chapter 66, for example, more naturally would fit in Part 5 on knowledge, but has an interesting link with religious belief. Let us celebrate the intermingling and weaving, and also the dipping into chapters that catch the eye and interest, rather than plowing through sequentially. Note 2. The endnotes for further musings. Simply by virtue of belonging to a community of speakers, we possess materials for philosophizing. There need be no special demands for mathematical ability, erudite historical knowledge or scientific investigations, just our everyday experiences. Philosophers rarely become directly involved in physical experiments, treks through muddy swamps or the hard work of archaeological digs. We prefer the armchair, pen and paper, keyboard, and even the occasional glass of wine, or two. Philosophers do, though, reflect on others' worldly investigations, be they physical, psychological or religious. Philosophizing itself displays the interconnection of things. What's wrong with contradictions? With the paradoxes, puzzles and perplexities, we often start with some comments, beliefs or principles, which appear obviously true. These can be seen as premises. We do some reasoning, expecting to reach acceptable conclusions. Perplexity arises when the reached conclusions hit us as manifestly false, unacceptable or, in some way, undesirable. They contradict or are in tension with our starting beliefs. Something must have gone wrong with the reasoning, or maybe our starting points are mistaken, or could the tensions be intrinsic features of the world? Philosophers try to locate any mistakes, seek to explain how the perplexities have arisen and aim to avoid contradictions. Two contradictory thoughts cannot both be true. You come home and find two notes left by your partner. One says, "Wait in for me," and the other says, "Don't wait in for me." What do? They are contradictory instructions, so, you are baffled. Witness bafflement at this book's dedication. Hence, we need to avoid contradictions, to avoid being contra in speech or diction. That avoidance applies beyond instructions. Your friend tells you, "It will rain today," and then adds, "It won't rain today." You are bemused. What does she believe? What should you do umbrella-wise? Because we seek understanding, we may try to explain away contradictions. Maybe the notes show a mind change. Maybe the speaker of rain speaks at different locations. Opening eyes, exercising the mind and talking the sun down. Seneca of ancient Rome commented how things are daily occurrence, even when most worthy of amazement and admiration, pass us by unnoticed. We may be likened to sleepwalkers, successfully finding our way, yet unaware of what we are doing. Philosophy opens eyes. Philosophy has value in itself, intrinsic value, but it is also a means of exercising the mind about matters that matter. When difficulties in finding correct answers come to the fore, it may even generate some welcome humility. Further, philosophy is a means of sharing, of togetherness. Socrates of ancient Greece, often seen as the inspirer of Western philosophy, stressed the importance of dialogue. Discussing with others what counts as fair salaries, whether speech that offends should be permitted, how free we are really, may help to bring forth a common humanity, a genuine sense in which we are, all in it together, trying to understand the universe and our place within. That contrasts with the mythical economic mantra of, "We're all in it together," which has been much loved in recent years by those in power in Britain. Philosophical puzzles continue to perplex. That shows how they differ from puzzles that can be solved through scientific research or logical and mathematical reasoning. Here is science. In 1616, a certain John Bullock offered as paradox the affirmation that, "The earth doth move round, and the heavens stand still." Today most people accept that the earth both spins and orbits the sun. The astronomical evidence is in. Here is straight logic. Concerning only the three people mentioned, Osbert is in love just with Penelope, but Penelope is in love just with Quentin. Osbert is a philosopher. Quentin is not. Is a philosopher in love with a non-philosopher? Is the answer yes, no, or cannot tell? Please see the endnotes for the answer, which, once explained, generates no controversy. Here is probability. In the Monty Hall show, there are 3 doors, A, B and C. One door has a desirable prize hidden behind, say, gold bars. The other 2 doors each have a goat behind them. For this puzzle we assume that goats are neither desirable nor desired. You want the prize. Which door hides the prize has been decided randomly. Consider a game. You choose a door, say A. Maybe a goat lurks behind that door, maybe the prize does. The show's presenter, she knows what is behind each door, opens one of the other doors, B or C, showing you one of the 2 goats. Let us say that she opens B. She then asks you if you want to change your choice from door A to B or C. Obviously, you do not want B, you see a goat there, but should you change to C? Is it rational to change your mind? Would you increase your chance of winning? The solution, over which thoughtful philosophers and mathematicians are now agreed, appears in the endnotes. Russell's T's and Nietzsche's greatest weight. In contrast to the puzzles just given, with scientific evidence or logical reasoning providing firm solutions, philosophical perplexities continue to haunt. Here are a couple, starting with a logical paradox. Two of the most eminent philosophers of the early 20th century are the Cambridge philosophers Bertrand Russell and G. E. Moore. Moore was perceived as a man of complete honesty and integrity. Russell was worldly wise, a lover of many women, and mischievous. One day, Russell naughtily asked Moore if he always spoke the truth. Moore, being suitably modest, replied, "No." Now, was Moore saying something true, or false? Moore's answer amounted to, "I do not always speak the truth." Let us assume, though, that Moore was indeed being modest and everything else Moore ever said was true. Moore's answer amounts to, "What I am saying now is not true." That is baffling, for, if what he is saying is not true, then, as that is what he is saying, it is after all true. Moreover, if what he is saying is true, then it is not true. That is an example of a famous paradox, the liar. It can be traced back to antiquity. It and related paradoxes are examined in Chapter 25. The tale illustrates how philosophers often have eyes for, and delight in, witty, humorous and quirky perspectives on everyday affairs. In fact, Wittgenstein, more on him below, proposed that some good philosophy could be written consisting entirely as a series of jokes. Jokes can both give rise to perplexity and yet, after some thought, be revealing. Mae West quipped, "When I'm good, I'm very, very good. When I'm bad, I'm better." That raises serious questions of morality and linguistic innuendo, yet initially generates merely a welcoming smile at the ambiguous perplexity. Here is a different sort of perplexity, courtesy of Friedrich Nietzsche, the 19th century thinker often deemed existentialist. Nietzsche hypothesized the eternal recurrence, the greatest weight, asking whether we could be so well disposed to our lives that we would welcome our lives being repeated eternally, exactly the same each time round. Of course, were the repetitions exactly the same, with the whole universe repeating itself in exactly the same way, then we should be unaware of the repetitions. We may even doubt the sense of there being repetitions of items exactly the same, a metaphysical puzzle. The eternal recurrence, this most dreadful and anguishing of thoughts, is probably intended, though, to concentrate our minds on how we ought to live, on what sort of life we value and on what we can bear in life, thoughts that can trouble all of us at times. He could teach me nothing. Arguably the greatest 20th century philosopher is Ludwig Wittgenstein. Soon after he first arrived in Cambridge to see what Russell thought of him, yes, the same Russell as above, he was perceived as a genius, albeit tormented, strange and arrogant. Russell sent him to learn some logic from W. E. Johnson, the established and elderly logician. They survived only one session together. Afterwards, Wittgenstein reported to Russell, "He could teach me nothing." Johnson reported to friends, "I could teach him nothing." Johnson and Wittgenstein, in one sense, were both saying the same thing about Johnson, yet they meant very different things. Johnson perceived the young Wittgenstein as conceited and unprepared to listen. Wittgenstein thought of Johnson as fuddy-duddy, out of date. Later they became friends, with Wittgenstein admiring Johnson's piano playing, radically more so than ever he did Johnson's logic. The story reminds us that we need to pay careful attention to meaning and to what is intended by what is said. That requires attention to context, motives and presuppositions. Suppose I comment that the Lord Chief Justice remained wide awake during the defense counsel's summing up today. My words alone do not logically imply that he usually nods off, but, given the context and presuppositions, his typically being half asleep when in court may well be conveyed. It is the conversational implicature of what I said. Casimir Louis, a philosopher who attended Moores and Wittgenstein's lectures, was once asked his view of a colleague's recent book. "It's printed on fine quality paper," was his heavily Polish accented response. Nothing more needed to be said. Although most philosophers strongly reject the idea that philosophical perplexities end up being just linguistic matters, all would agree that linguistic care and clarity is much needed, if we are to gain a proper understanding of the world. Mind you, the demand for clarity is a challenge to certain postmodernists, who appear to value obscurity. I have in mind the excesses of Derrida, Irigaray and Kristeva, but perhaps the problem is mine, in my failing to comprehend washing, evolution, even God. Søren Kierkegaard, a 19th-century Danish philosopher, now seen as a religious existentialist, saw a shop with the sign, "Bring your washing here." Kierkegaard hurried back to his lodgings, collected his dirty washing and took it to the shop, only to discover that the shop was not a laundry, but a shop that sold shop signs. The tale reminds us that we need to be careful in assessing what a sign is a sign of, in assessing how to interpret words and deeds. My actions have been open to misinterpretation, maybe a truth, or an excuse. Matters of interpretation come especially to the fore when we consider questions of how we ought to behave. Should letting someone die be seen as equivalent to killing? After all, the outcome is the same. A human being's best